The views and opinions expressed by the hosts of this podcast are those of the individual and not of any affiliated companies. Occasional adult language is used.
Welcome to the ShamTalk podcast, the #1 Notre Dame athletics podcast in the world. Today, the guys talk all about men's basketball. They'll review Coach Shrewsbury's first season and talk about next year's expectations. Additionally, the guys will give you their bracket picks, including what to look out for in this year's tournament. And now, from the Duncan Student Center, here's your host, Jake Miller.
And this is March, and welcome back to the ShamTalk podcast. It's been a while. We're still here. It's good to be able to talk some basketball, recap Notre Dame men's basketball season. A strong finish after what looked like a very pitiful losing streak in January, February. Joining me today, Trey Cotey of NDTV. I'm Jake Miller. Welcome. This is March. It's a great holiday.
Oh, it's the best month of the year. I mean, we finally made it. You know, it started back in October, November. You know, went through those dreary winter months, but here we are, the best time of the year.
You know, I think while this is March, it has been March in a way. It has been basketball season since Notre Dame got upset by Louisville in Louisville. You know, that's when the football season was over. The hopes were gone. Hey, maybe there's not any more real hope for Notre Dame right now on the women's side, losing Kylie Watson. But we're going to be talking mostly on the men's side today. If you want to look for women's coverage, we have a bunch of women's coverage out there right now on the Observer website. We have a full show that's going to be up on NDTV's TV. So if you're looking for some women's basketball coverage, that's the story right now. That's all over. But we're going to be talking some men's basketball today, taking a look at Coach Shrewsbury's first year, what went well, what he needs to do a little bit differently. But, I mean, Trey finishes the season, tough loss to Wake Forest, a team they beat. Wake Forest goes around and loses the next day, but it's a nice win to Georgia Tech. He's able to, after Georgia Tech makes that run at the end of the game, a little bit of a comeback win. Are you impressed with where this team ended?
I mean, coming into the season, this is my first real year as a Notre Dame super fan,
Yep.
I guess you can say. I've always been a little fan watching the games, but this is the first year that I really, put it all on the line and really rode with this team. And I did not have high expectations. If you go back to Shamrock Sports, I was on the show for the kind of intro preseason. What do we think is going to happen this year? I predicted 9 to 10 wins. So to get a few more than that, it's really nice. And super optimistic about this way this team ended. You were referencing that ACC Tournament semi-run, if you want to call it that.
We'll call it a run.
Is one game a run?
For this team, maybe.
Okay. I mean, more than I thought was going to happen at the beginning of the year. That Georgia Tech game, we looked so good in the first half, and that's just kind of a reflection of how we looked basically all February.
Yeah.
And then we lose a tough one to Wake Forest. I mean, they're playing for their season there as a bubble team. End up losing a tough one to Pitt, who, for the record, should have gotten in.
Should have gotten in. This is post-Virginia, folks, recording after the terrible loss.
I mean, 14 points in the first half. What are we doing here?
I don't know.
But I'm very impressed with this team, I think we got a lot of bright spots going forward. We're into the offseason now after a really, really good month. And I think for some transfers, it's kind of an appealing place. I mean, young team, coach that's done it in the past. Yep. It is in South Bend, Indiana, so, take some, win some, you lose some. But I think this is an appealing team going forward, and I'm super excited for what we can bring to the table next year.
It'll be very interesting to see if this team can really grow in the X's and O's. It might have been something that was their greatest weakness at times, and I was able to be in Washington, D.C. as part of the Observer's coverage last week, and it was interesting to me when you listen to Coach Shrewsbury and was able to hear him, how much of what's on the floor is he's planning, right? He's not kind of letting his guys go out there. They're either running sets, they're running plays, which is kind of crazy at the collegiate level of how many plays they're running, or maybe they are kind of, just going at it, trying to figure stuff out. He's yelling at them, telling them exactly what to do, telling them where to pick, where to cut. Okay, you're going to hold this pick for right now. It's an interesting way to kind of have a coach manipulate it that much, but I think for a young team it works. I'm interested to see next year maybe if the off-ball cuts are going to be better, the ball movement, you get a little bit faster as a team on offense, not as many shot clock violations. It'll be interesting to see if they can kind of take that step from the basketball IQ, the maturity perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, with a young team, there's going to be growing pains.
Yep.
And we saw that a lot this year, especially towards the beginning of the season. I mean, like you look at that NC State game, and that one really stings.
Yep.
When that you were leading wire to wire, and then they take the lead for the first time in the game with 0.3 seconds left or something like that. I mean, so going forward, this team's definitely, you saw them mature a little bit. But you also saw Micah kind of figure out, Coach Shrewsbury, what he wants to do with this team. Because earlier in the year, at least from a fan perspective, it kind of seemed like we were just giving the ball to Marcus Burton with 8 minutes left and under, and just like, hey, go do something.
Do some ISO ball, yeah.
Do something. And a lot of times that ended in a turnover. A lot of times it ended in some heroics from the young ACC Rookie of the Year. But I really like what Coach Shrewsbury was doing going forward. And, you're seeing him yell at people. You're seeing him yell at his son, Braden, kind of getting on guys.
Yep.
And I really like that from a perspective of kind of, pushing this team to get better and telling them, I've been here, I've done this, this is how it needs to happen if we're going to make some noise. So I like it from that perspective, and I like it going forward, especially if we're bringing in some more guys next year, maybe going to have a little bit more talent, some more shot creation other than Burton, because a lot of times it felt like he was the only guy that could really get anything going, which is maybe why we were giving him the ball coming off a handoff or coming off a double screen or something towards the end of the game. So maybe with more talent next year, we can even see Coach Shrewsbury get a little deeper in his playbook bag and, set up some better formations and even get some more shot creation out there.
I think something that went under the radar this year is the play of Tay Davis. This guy who's coming in, he gets some minimal bench action last year at Seton Hall, the Indianapolis native, kind of comes home, right? He's a sophomore, probably not, the most outspoken guy, but really put together a nice season, double-digit games in his last 6. Not the biggest rebounding presence, averages about 5, but gets them at times, plays solid defense. But it's kind of an interesting role for him because he's not a post player, he's not a guard, but he often kind of mans the lane, especially when the team's in some sort of a zone. Next year, we kind of have similar players, at least similar in size, coming in. There's kind of going to be very clear 3 categories. You got your guards, you got your forwards, and you got your posts. Maybe we'll put, even put Kerry Booth in the forward game. Now Notre Dame has more strength on all sides of the ball. How do you think that's going to help the team next year?
I think being deeper is something worth noting because this year we played a lot of guys, but some of the guys we were playing weren't really doing all that much.
Yep.
You look at a guy like Julian Roper, averaged 4 points a game as a freshman and a sophomore at Northwestern, comes in, ends up averaging 8 or 9 points a game for the beginning of the year, and then he kind of lost a lot of minutes going into conference play there because he wasn't really getting it done. And he made a few decent plays. He was a hustle guy, somewhat of a veteran on this team.
Yep.
Another guy, J.R. Knesny, started earlier in the year, was playing decent. And then we kind of got to the point where him and Roper were just kind of 2 wings that weren't really doing anything. So when they were out there, they weren't getting those productive minutes. So I think being deeper across the board, it's going to help because our bench, there isn't going to be a significant drop-off. And I think there were a few games this year where you saw that drop-off, and it really hurt us.
Notre Dame really did not have a second unit that could come into a game and change things up. The second unit was minutes to help with stamina. And I think, it was a team that maybe their defensive efficiency didn't go down a lot. The defensive BPM didn't go down a lot. But you could definitely see that what they could do on offense went down a lot. Interesting, though, J.R. Knesny did play some of the closing minutes in the ACC tournament. That surprised me, especially because he wasn't getting those earlier. I think if, it's a transfer game, and I don't think Notre Dame is going to make any huge moves or have any huge losses. But you got to think there's a couple of guys in these roster, maybe the Bray relics of Knesny and Zona that might be on their way out, which, could present an opportunity for Micah Shrewsbury in the transfer portal to bring somebody in. What do you think is the need on this team? Imagine, we get Sir Muhammad in, Marcus is staying, Braden is staying, Kerry Booth is staying, Jai is staying. You have that group. What do they need to add if there's a piece that Coach can find right now?
I would say that the biggest need on this team is a big.
Yep.
Specifically a big that can do something offensively. Because Keba, he played well defensively in the post down the stretch. He's a pretty good rebounder, but especially if Zona's on his way out, and Zona did pick up a few of those minutes, but I think a big is really necessary to kind of take this team over the edge. Because if we're looking at next year, the aspirations of this team are more than a 9 or a 10 seed in the ACC tournament. I think we're pushing into that 6-7 range. Maybe even higher if Burton can really get it done and Sir Muhammad is what we think he's going to be. And I think getting that extra guard play from the young guys, getting Sir Muhammad in there, I think our guard room is going to be pretty decent next year.
Yeah.
With Burton, Shrewsbury, Sir Muhammad, Cole Serta coming in as well as another
wasn't
top
turning the ball
freshman.
over either. Wasn't doing
I
a
like
lot, but he
Imes
wasn't
a lot.
turning the ball over. That's for a freshman that's coming in and playing backup point guard minutes. The fact that he's not making mistakes Got to give credit to him.
I really like Imes because he's not super flashy offensively, and you see a lot of casual fans watching, some students at the game, and they see him in there, and he's not like breaking anyone's ankles or driving to the lane or shooting threes, but he's doing his role, and I think there's something to say for a backup point guard that can come in, control the tempo. You saw him play late in games down the stretch sometimes, trying to break the press, keeping it tight, not turning it over, as you were mentioning. And I think that's something valuable. So I think our guards are going to be really, really good next year. So I don't think we need to lean too heavily into that in the transfer portal. More of a bigger forward to a center, I think, is something that we could really use going forward.
It's interesting to me. Take a look at what Kevin Jai's done. His first year at Penn State, he's playing 14 minutes a game under Coach Shrewsbury, 3 points. That year, he made 52 out of 100 attempts. This year, he takes less field goals, actually. Obviously, he had the tournament games and played a couple more with the Big Ten, right? But only made 37 field goals on 99 attempts. Now, he did get more foul shots, but he was playing 24 minutes on average a game. To me, I think it is really at this point, he has 2 years left. And while I think he is a good player, a player that can help out, a player that Notre Dame is glad to have, he's not a prospect anymore. The guy's going to continue to grow, but he's not at this rate of his career. He needs to, I think we've kind of seen what he's going to be, and I think he will grow a little bit. I think he's going to grow in size. He's going to grow in defensive maturity. He had a tech in Notre Dame's last game of the season, stuff like that. I think it's going to go away. But from the offensive production, Notre Dame needs to add a legitimate center that can play minutes as a backup or play with, kind of as like a Gobert-Towns scenario, play with Jai if Notre Dame needs to go big. This year, obviously, Jai and Booth are starting every game, but those, I wouldn't call that a big, they're not both true centers. I think Notre Dame, there's options out in the portal, and I think that's what Shrewsbury's looking at right now. Hey, who can I bring in as a sixth man? Who can I bring in if Jai has a lot of fouls to really make meaningful impacts in the game?
Yeah, especially because, as you're mentioning, some of those foul trouble situations, we would play Booth at a 5 and Tay Davis at a 4.
Yep.
And, Tay is a bigger forward, but I don't know if he's banging with the big boys at a 4. And same for Booth. Tall, high prospect, a lot of upside on Booth. Really excited to see where his game goes in the offseason. Maybe if he can get in the weight room, get a little bit more pounds on him. Maybe he can start at that 5 role next year even. But another big just to take some of those minutes away from Jai. And I don't even think it needs to be a super offensive 5.
Yeah.
Because Keba Jai shot 12% from 3 this year. He wasn't shooting a large volume of them either. He doesn't need to, because on this team next year, we're going to be extremely ball dominant in terms of shot selection. We were this year too.
Yep.
Burton's taking obviously the majority of the shots. Shrewsbury is certainly letting it fly from deep, and he's taking a lot of shots as well. I think Sir Muhammad, slasher, he'll also be getting downhill. I think that the type of big that we need is someone similar to Jai, but maybe just like a little bit better at everything. Or not even, just a similar prospect to take away some minutes and give him a blow. Just a guy that can, set good screens, roll, protect the paint. Someone like that would really, really benefit this team, especially in some of those deeper games in the ACC regular season play.
I full-heartedly agree. Now let's take a look at ACC play. Next year, the ACC adds 3 teams, but you can't be scared about any of those 3 teams. SMU's the NIT team this year. Stanford just fired their coach. Cal's not doing anything over there.
I'm not worried about Cal.
No, exactly. You shouldn't be. But you take a look at some of these other ACC teams, maybe even ones that did, made some moves this year. Wake Forest loses their entire team, all seniors. North Carolina loses a couple of their best players. RJ Davis is gone, exactly. I mean, Baycott, I assume, stays, maybe, but even there, it's not the same team as it was this year. Duke is probably going to continue to grow. I think they're probably going to be your ACC favorites.
Duke's recruiting class next year is
it's nuts.
Something wild. I mean,
at the same time, what has Shire been able to do so far? He hasn't looked too good in his first 2 years.
I think this Duke team next year is going to be different. Maybe I'm wrong because maybe I'm a John Shire believer and I shouldn't be. I have no reason to be.
Yep.
But Cooper Flagg is one of the best prospects I've seen in a long time. I am over the moon about that guy. They got a few other top 25 people coming in. Con Knipple from my hometown state of Wisconsin just won a state championship, won by 25 in the state championship game. I mean, they have a really, really solid recruiting class. I'm assuming they're going to have a few of the older guys come back. Maybe Mark Mitchell stays.
Yeah.
I like this Duke team next year a lot.
But you take away some of these other teams, especially the ones at the bottom of the barrel. Louisville's, it can't get worse, but there's no hope there. Miami, there's not a lot of hope. Syracuse will probably be decent, but Georgia Tech will get a little bit better. They return a lot of the young guys.
Stoudemeier's building a good program.
He's building a good program. You got to give him credit. 3 losses to Shrews, but he's done some good. I think in his record will turn in the future. But anyways, Notre Dame, I think next year you're looking at a team that wants to do damage in the ACC, and this year the ACC got 4 teams in. That's not great, but if you're Notre Dame, you're looking at that 4, 5, 6 to try to make it in the NCAA tournament.
With the ACC this year, you also kind of got to look at, there were 2 bubble teams that in a normal year maybe they get in, but with all of the bid stealers from the conference tournaments, like an Oregon winning or a New Mexico winning either. Yeah. There were NC State, obviously. A lot of bid stealers. 5 teams from the ACC, right, with NC State?
With NC State, you're right.
Yeah. No one was thinking about them.
Well.
No one was thinking about them. I totally forgot. You got to consider that. So, Pitt, I think most people believe Pitt should have been a tournament team.
Yep.
What was weird with the ACC this year was kind of just the national narrative.
Yeah.
About how everyone was just kind of saying the ACC, they can't play over there. I don't really know where that stemmed from, but I remember hearing a stat. The Big 12, by everyone considered by far the best conference in basketball this year. They got 8 teams in it. Head-to-head versus the ACC, in out-of-conference play, the ACC has a winning record against them, and it's not particularly close. So I don't really know where that national narrative came from. If that stays the same next year, I think Notre Dame would have to be in that 5-6 range to really be snuffing at a bubble team, but hopefully that can turn around. Hopefully we can do pretty well out of conference next year. I think that the goal for this team, and obviously you can't really say until we see what happens in the portal.
Yep.
But I think we should definitely be pushing for the 7 mark. I think if we can get up to that 7 mark, I think that'd be a huge jump for this team.
Let's talk schedule a little bit. So the way the ACC is working now is you're going to play everybody in the league, and you're going to play 3 teams. I think they call them your partner, your pod. I think it's partner is the word they're using, twice, both home and away. Notre Dame draws Boston College, Georgia Tech, and Syracuse. It's an interesting pod because really you think Louisville would be in that pod with how close we are. Maybe Pitt's only 5 hours. Nonetheless, geographically doesn't make sense. We're going to play a young Georgia Tech team home and away. That'll be fun. Syracuse, you'll be able to get J.J. Starling, assuming he comes back. He'll be able to come back,
little revenge
play some games, some revenge game. I know we didn't get it this year with Cormac Ryan, but we'll get it this year, J.J. Starling. And then BC, a team that Notre Dame lost to twice.
BC's losing a lot.
They are losing a lot.
Scare me.
They are losing a lot, but at the same time, they just had a nice win against Providence. They have a good system there if things are able to go. So we know exactly what their conference schedule is going to look like. UNC at home is going to be the big game next year for fans, assuming it's not over Christmas break. Probably will be, though, knowing the ACC
Cross our fingers, could use one of the big ones next year. That'd be
Tom
fun.
Noy, we're listening to you, man. You need your students here. What programs would you want Notre Dame to schedule non-conference matchups with?
Oof. I think there's a lot out there that are really interesting. I think, as I was saying, I'd like to see some Big 12 games.
Yeah.
The Big 12, they might be losing a little bit. They got a few older teams there. But they're still bringing back a lot. Iowa State next year is going to be really good. That'd be an intriguing matchup to me. I think Iowa State's going to have a really good tournament run this year. I think a matchup with them, they got a few young guys too. That's just one off the bat that I think would be a really, really interesting matchup, especially because they got a few bigger guys. So kind of seeing how Booth would fare against a Milan Monsilovic or against a Trey King or something like that, I think that'd be interesting. And then some Big Ten games, maybe in Indiana.
I think Notre Dame used to go down and play, I think it was called the Crossroads Classic down at the Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. They'd play, the rotation between IU, Butler, and I think it was Indiana State was the third team in that. That stopped. But it would be nice to have an in-conference game. I don't think they're ever going to have Indiana come here or go down to Indiana. I think that's just too much. But, I think that would be nice. I think it would be a lot of fun. You've had these, former Big East matchups with Georgetown and Marquette. I'm down to play Marquette every year, have them come to Notre Dame again. But at some point, maybe I think it is good for Notre Dame to branch out and to really try to get out there as much as possible. Also, they'll be playing the SEC, ACC Challenge. I guess they're not guaranteed a spot with that.
Oh, yeah.
With the amount of teams, ACC will have 18. SEC is going to have 16?
I think 16.
I think 16 with Texas and Oklahoma. So 2 teams lose out there. But, hey, Notre Dame lost early in the season, played a close game, lost at South Carolina, to a South Carolina team that's really, really turned it around.
They were undefeated at that point, went on a big run, got up to, I think, 13th in the country, maybe? I mean,
well, Notre Dame will be, assuming they play in that is their year to host a game, so that'll be fun for the fans here in South Bend. Trey, before we take a little break here and look at the bracket as a whole, the NCAA tournament this year, Irish left out, any final thoughts on where Notre Dame's going, what Notre Dame accomplished this season?
I think that fans should be maybe overly optimistic going forward. I was able to talk to Coach Shrewsbury, a little interview, sit-down chat for Shamrock Sports a little bit earlier this year towards the end of January. And what he told me when I asked about how he wanted to finish the season was he was telling his guys they really, really, in this month of February that was approaching, he told them they had to come together and kind of attack everything as a herd, as one unit. And you saw us go on that little run there. We won 6 of 7. I think that there's a lot to look forward to going forward with this team. The transfer portal's opened. Burton looks like he's probably going to stay. Booth's going to stay. Shrewsbury's obviously going to stay. We got our core back. We're getting a few nice pieces that are young. Maybe we look into the portal, get a big, as we were saying. I think there's a lot to look forward to going to this team, and I see no reason why we couldn't make a run at maybe even the NCAA tournament next year. Maybe I'm a little ahead of schedule on that. But I don't think it's something that is naive to look at and think we could make a run at that.
I think it's very possible, and I think that should be the goal. I think that is Coach Shrewsbury's goal for next year, is to get this team back into March Madness next year. Hey, ShamTalk fans, we've got a quick message from our friends at Amazon for you. We always do appreciate your support and your attention here. Right after this break, we're going to talk March Madness tournament, maybe some bracket busters, who you should watch out for. We have an amazing 3 weeks coming up. You're listening to the ShamTalk podcast.
You're listening to the ShamTalk podcast, the #1 Notre Dame athletics podcast in the world. We appreciate your support, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve the listener experience. In order to do that, we need your help. We have a pretty cool relationship with Amazon.com, and we'd like to invite you to join us. Amazon recently sent us a special link. When you use this link to buy something from Amazon, we receive a small percentage of the order. Best of all, it costs nothing extra for you. The link is available on the screen and in the description below. Once again, before you head to Amazon, start with our link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it helps us provide you with the best possible listener experience. Thanks for your support, and let's send it back to the guys.
And a big thank you to our friends at Amazon. Just a reminder, before you make any of those purchases, click the link on the screen. It costs you nothing extra. It takes 10 seconds, and we really do benefit from that and appreciate it. Helps us create more great content, improve the quality for folks like you. Appreciate your time with us here on the ShamTalk podcast. I'm back with Trey Cotey today. Trey, first round games are starting. The first 4 is done. We are here, and there's going to be a lot of craziness. Nobody's ever had a perfect bracket. I think somebody in 2019 got 49 to start.
Center Road.
49 to start.
Center Road.
And then broke it down. Who's going to break it this year? Which are the teams that you're looking at the bracket thinking they're going to be the schools that people learn? They're going to be what makes March Madness the best playoffs in all of sports.
Well, just for the record, my bracket's perfect this year.
Of course.
So sorry about it. I'm the first of all time. But in all seriousness, what makes this tournament so great is that even guys like us that watch hundreds of hours of college basketball, and that's not hyperbole, have no idea what's going to happen.
No.
Literally none. And that's why it's amazing. And there are so many things that I'm really, really interested in this year.
Yep.
And I got a lot of teams that are maybe lower seeds going somewhat far. A team that has really caught my eye a lot is McNeese. They're a 12 seed. They got Shahada Wells, who I think might be the most under-the-radar player in the tournament this year. Former TCU guy, averaging about 18 a game this year. They got a 12-5 matchup with Gonzaga in the first round. I don't love Gonzaga this year. I know Gonzaga hasn't given you much reason in the past to think they're going to go out early necessarily, but I don't know if this is one of Mark Few's better squads in the last 5 years or so. I think that they can really get it done. They won their conference championship by like 16 or 17 points. And then if they get past that Gonzaga team, they're going into a second-round matchup against the winner of Kansas and Samford.
That's a Kansas team that in their last game got blown out early.
Absolutely demolished by Cincinnati.
Yep.
Now, in that game, they didn't have Hunter Dickinson or Kevin McCullough, but news yesterday, Kevin McCullough out for the tournament.
Yep.
That's a top 2 guy on that squad out for the year, and they have not looked good without him in the last few weeks. The Samford team, another team that I think could really beat Kansas in that 13-4 matchup. They shoot a lot of threes, they're high pace, and seeing how Kansas looked against Cincinnati, who's not a tournament team, it was not pretty. That's their worst loss in Big 12 tournament history, lost by 20 or something. The road for McNeese to make an Elite 8, or at least a Sweet 16, is, I think, one of the easier 5-4 little bits there that I really think they got a favorable matchup. And then if they make that Elite 8, they're playing a Purdue team, theoretically, if Purdue gets there.
Yep.
That the national narrative is Purdue's not going to do much this year. I don't know if I agree with that.
Sure.
I don't agree with that. I'll say that right now.
Yep.
I think Purdue's going to the Elite 8.
Interesting. I'd agree with you, too. I think they have as easy of a path to the Elite 8 as you can get.
I'm somewhat high on that TCU team.
Sure, okay.
They got Jameer Nelson Jr. hit a game winner earlier this year. Made a little bit of noise in the Big 12 tournament.
McNeese State gets there. That's a matchup. That's a crazy matchup. Will Wade going up against Matt Painter.
I mean, it's the guy that has never done anything in March versus the guy that got kicked out of LSU.
Exactly. I kicked out of March.
Two pretty somewhat controversial coaches for very different reasons.
Yeah.
But that'll be a fun matchup. I'm hoping it gets there. I'm hoping it gets there, but that'll be one that I got all eyes on. How about you? You got any bracket busters?
Well, let's take a look at McNeese State a little bit more. For betting fans, it's an interesting bet, and I think that's a bet with a lot of value, regardless if it doesn't hit. If you're able to use all of these services right now, some sort of no-sweat dealers promotion going on, McNeese State money line to beat Gonzaga is actually going at plus 225, which is you got to take that and put a no sweat on it, or put a boost on it or something to give it a little bit more value. But the fact that just for them to win, no spread, just win, is at 225. You got to take that chance. You got to take that odds, in our opinion here. Teams that I like, I'm taking a look at another region. I'm a big fan of Nebraska, and I have to say I've watched a lot of Big Ten basketball this year. I've watched my Gophers lose to Nebraska. Unfortunate, but they're a great team. I think they're a well-rounded team, and they're a team that's been very streaky, but they played well in the Big Ten tournament. They got a good Illinois team, and who they played down to the last few minutes. I think they can do a lot of damage, especially with their height and their depth against Houston, who did not look good last weekend versus Iowa State.
I like that pick, too, and we were talking a little bit before the show about some of the, maybe a little bit crazier things that we thought were going to happen, and we're both picking Nebraska to make the Sweet 16.
Absolutely.
That's coming from two Big Ten guys. You're a Gopher fan, I'm a Badger fan. Looking in that region, too, a matchup, maybe not a bracket buster, but a matchup for me that's really, really interesting is my Badgers going against James Madison, a team that went 30-3, made noise earlier in the year when they beat Michigan State in overtime at the Breslin Center in the first game of the year. Beating the number 4 overall team in the country. Michigan State is definitely not there now.
No.
But an impressive win from James Madison and a really impressive season from them. This is a game where a lot of the money is on James Madison here. It's a 5v12. Bucky out of 5 might be a little high.
Yep.
But I like Bucky in that game. They started the year red hot. We're up to 6th in the country and then went through a massive losing streak. But then come back in the Big Ten tournament and look like maybe, do I say one of the best teams in the country? Chucky Hepburne's playing maybe the best basketball of his career.
Lights out.
AJ Storr's playing like a first-team All-Big Ten selection, even though he was a second team.
Yep.
Stephen Crowell, our center's playing with a little fire. I really like this Badger team, and I think they're kind of picking it back up at the right time.
Wisconsin opens at -5. That game is on Friday. Late game. One of the
9:40
last games we got.
9:40 Eastern.
Got here. You know, it's unfortunate for Wisconsin. They play so well. You might be thinking this is the year. Big Ten tournament. That arena down in Minneapolis is packed with Badger fans, all red. Not get a 5 seed. That's unfortunate to start, and then they get the region of death. And not only the region of death, they get teams around them that you are not excited for. James Madison, what happens if they win that game and find themselves in a date with Duke?
They don't win.
Yeah.
They don't win.
Okay.
They could win, but they don't. Because this is a Duke team. And John Shire, young career for a man, hasn't done great so far. But this is a Duke team that simply just has a lot of talent on the team. And talent typically finds a way to win in March. They got a young team, but I think what's different with this Duke team versus a team like last year's Duke team is that a lot of their returning guys are older now. They got a Kyle Filipowski, a sophomore. They got a Tyrese Proctor, a sophomore. They got a Jeremy Roach, a senior, a point guard leader. They got a Mark Mitchell, another sophomore, and then Jared McCain, Caleb Foster, Sean Stewart. The freshmen are endless. But they have a lot of talent on this team, and I can see this Duke team going on a run. I really can. I think that if Madison makes it out of the first round, I think that Wisconsin versus Duke matchup will be really, really fun. But I don't really see the Badgers getting it done. And then that game will be probably play the winner of Houston and Nebraska if Nebraska gets there. And that'll also be a fun game. I mean, that's going to be that top half of that upper right region is really, really fun because there's a lot of fun teams and a lot of fun that can happen.
It's very interesting. Another pick that's interesting and Vegas likes right now is out of Iowa. Drake is playing Washington State. Vegas actually favoring Drake right now, the 10 seed versus 7 seed Washington State by 1.5. Drake is a very interesting team. They played well. They won the Valley, beating Indiana State, taking their spot. They only get one for the league, obviously. The tournament committee is not looking favorable on the Valley. Drake is an interesting team. They played well. They've kind of been a basketball powerhouse for a while in that league, especially after Wichita State's left. But on average, double-digit seeds, even at the 10, typically about 6 per year win a first-round game. And keep in mind that there are 28 double-digit seeds that play first-round games. So on average, it's very low. Do you think this is a double-digit seed that can pull it off versus Washington State?
I'm high on this Drake team. Their best player is Tucker DeVries, averaging over 20 points a game this year. He is fun. I don't know if many of the listeners watched that Indiana State Drake game, but that was a really, really fun game to watch. Indiana State down big. Drake took a really early lead on there. I think they might have gotten it up to 18. And then Indiana State kind of came storming back in the last 8 minutes or so. But Tucker DeVries is a guy that is going to score. Yep. He's really tough to stop. He's a bigger guard, maybe even a small forward. Yep. Takes a lot of shots, has the ball a lot. And if he's on, he's really tough to stop. And I'm a big fan of this Drake team. I mean, if they win that first game against Washington State, who also has been really fun this year, kind of came out of nowhere in that Pac-12 last year, the Pac-12 there. So that is an interesting game. There's a lot of really good first-round matchups that I'm super excited for. But I'm kind of upset that those teams got paired up against each other because I think those are two teams that could have maybe gone on somewhat of a run here. Yeah. But that they're playing each other in the first round, I don't know.
First basketball fans next year, obviously losing the Pac is a bit of a loss. There's often underrated basketball there, more so on the women's side, where I think 2 of probably the 4 best teams in women's college basketball are in the Pac. Next year, Oregon State and Washington State for basketball join the WCC. That's going to make Gonzaga's run, St. Mary's run a lot harder, especially with BYU now in the Big 12. I think that's going to be a really fun league to watch in the regular season, some late night Pac-tion.
Let's talk a little bit about that St. Mary's team. We're just circling all the 5-12s here.
The 5-12s, I mean, hey, Stephen F. Austin isn't in the tournament to spoil everybody's game as a 12 this year. It's an interesting matchup. Some people love St. Mary's at the 5, and many don't. It's probably the best team in recent history for St. Mary's College. What are your thoughts?
I will say that I am one of those people that is very, very high on the St. Mary's team. I'm so high on them that I have them beating North Carolina and going to the Elite 8. Do I have them beating Arizona? I don't think so. Okay. But I have them getting there. the WCC for years, specifically St. Mary's, has been one of those conferences that's got 2, maybe 3 teams in it every year that go to the tournament, and everyone's thinking they're going to make some noise. This is a team that played in the West Coast Conference this year was pretty decent.
Yeah.
There was a really, really good San Francisco team. Santa Clara was a little underrated in my opinion. And they lost 1 game in conference, and that was to a Gonzaga team. And what I love about this team is kind of the moxie they carry with them. I remember one of their best players came out right before the West Coast Conference Championship game, which was in Vegas against Gonzaga. And they said, we lost to Gonzaga in our last matchup against them. That was on us. They're not a better team than us. We let that one get away. That's not going to happen.
Yep.
Going into that game, I thought Gonzaga was peaking at the right time. They had come off a win against St. Mary's. They had beat Kentucky during that little stretch of theirs. I thought this Gonzaga team is going to come out there and they're going to prove that they're still Gonzaga, they're still better than St. Mary's, and they're going to be that team. And St. Mary's just handled them. I'm really high on the St. Mary's team. I
mean, considering they have 2 wins in Gonzaga, that's a big one. I agree with you that San Francisco is a very underrated team. I think they're going to do some damage in the NIT. They have a win in the non-con versus New Mexico, who's a strong team. At the same time, they have a loss to they also beat Colorado State. They lost to Utah, lost to Boise State, both tournament teams, lost to Xavier, lost to San Diego State. San Diego State was a tournament team. Lost to Weber State, strangely. Nonetheless.
That's a weird one.
Yeah. An interesting team. They've been so up and down. I think if they have their game right, they could do some damage. I don't necessarily think they're going to be making the regional rounds. I think best case scenario for them is a round of 32 exit, but we'll have to see.
To Alabama?
Yeah.
They don't play a lick of defense, my friend.
I know they don't.
Not one lick of defense.
Well,
that's one of the 4s that I'm not high on the 4s this year. I like Duke. I think Duke's good. I'm really high on Auburn. But Kansas has some injury issues, so that I have that kind of whatever. Alabama's an interesting one because they're averaging almost over 90 points a game, but they're also letting up almost 90 points a game. And in pretty much all of their losses this year, they've given up over that 90 mark. So it kind of all depends on if the team they're playing is shooting the ball well. Because if the team they're playing is matching them on offense, running at that fast pace and making those deep shots, it's going to be tough to play. And their first-round matchup is against a Charleston team that historically has made the tournament pretty often in the last few years. Yeah. Typically a bunch of guys that are just going to stand in the corner, spot up, and shoot. So if this Charleston team is shooting the ball well, that's a tough matchup for Alabama. I don't think they should lose, but I would definitely not be surprised if Charleston makes that a close one.
We've given you guys some teams to watch for, some teams to break brackets. Let's take a look at the Final Four. Phoenix, Arizona, they're going down to the sun. It's not basketball season down there anymore. MLB will have started. We're in spring. Who you got going to the Final Four in your bracket this year?
This one's tough. This one's really tough. I've made about 4 or 5 brackets so far, and all of them are different. But the one that I like the most has 3 2 seeds in the Final Four and a 1 seed.
Okay.
And I'm not happy about it, but it's just kind of the way it happened. I got Iowa State.
Okay.
I got Arizona. I got Marquette, and I got Purdue.
Yeah, very interesting.
I got a championship game for Iowa State and Marquette, and I got Iowa State coming out on top. And now what I want to say is that there is a very real possibility that Iowa State loses in the Sweet 16 to an Illinois team that's playing really good ball right now.
That is
Terrence Shannon Jr. is playing like one of the best players in the country. Damask is a 6'6" guard, Wisconsin boy. We love that.
Yep.
We don't love what he just did against my Badgers in the Big Ten championship game, but their guard play is so good. And I think a guy like Coleman Hawkins on that team's a little underrated. Stretch 5, can make a step back 3 if you need it. I think whoever comes out of that top left region, that East region, I think they win it all. Whoever it is. And I can see the top 4 seeds coming out of there. UConn's obviously the undisputed favorite.
Yep.
I think an Auburn team is playing really good. Johnny Broom's unreal. They got Aiden Holloway, who's a nice freshman point guard. I think they're a really, really fun team. Won the SEC tournament. I think Illinois is playing well. But I've been high on this Iowa State team for months. And after that enormous victory against Houston, I feel super good about them.
Very interesting. I am going to go a little bit of a different route. I respect Iowa State. I think they're a strong team, and I think they will be facing UConn in the Elite Eight. I have UConn winning that one, but I would not be surprised at all if that goes to Iowa State. I do think UConn is my favorite to win the tournament. I think after that, the road actually possibly gets easier. I'm still high on Iowa State. I really think both teams should not be in the same region. But what UConn can do with Newton and Spencer playing all those minutes and their ability to get three-point production from a couple different guys, Stewart off the bench as well. They only play 8, but they play 8 really well. So I'm going UConn. I'm also going some other Big East, not only one.
You're going Creighton, aren't you?
I'm going Creighton as well. I think Creighton is one of the most underrated teams. They played both UConn and Marquette well. They played a hard non-conference schedule. McDermott has his team going. They play nice transition ball. They play a mixture of man and zone. When they play zone, they don't let up easy shots because his team is athletic. They can run and they move the ball. They prevent other teams from moving the ball well. I got Creighton. I'm really high on them. I do think that region is tough. When you're taking Purdue, I just don't think Purdue has enough guards, and I think Edey is going to be able to be trapped. I think he cannot move at all, so I'm not a fan of Edey. I think Tennessee, Rick Barnes, not typically a March coach. I'm not a fan of that. So I'm pretty confident that Creighton's going to be moving on in the Midwest. Heading up into the South. South is interesting. We both agree that Houston's going to get knocked out early. I'm going to go with a 2 seed as well. I think we both agree Marquette's going to come out of there. Collick's coming back. It's a good team. They stretch well, a lot of depth. They face a lot of different defenses, especially in the Big East where there's a division between zone and man. I really like them. So I have 3 teams in the Big East. I think all 3 make it this year. Obviously,
3 teams made it, 3 teams going to the Final Four.
Exactly. So my last option, I got to take Baylor down to the West. I think North Carolina is overrated. I think they played nice in the ACC Championship. NC State is a fluke of a team. They're not going to play that well, even in the first round. They just simply can't. UNC, they probably should have won that game, but nonetheless, their defense is too shaky. Their offensive productivity, Baycott, you never know what you're going to get. Davis, you really don't understand what he's going to be able to bring to the table in any given game. It's almost a roster that's too complete that they aren't able to isolate guys separately. Almost when you get that super team, it seems like it takes away from some of the productivity of some of their guys. Arizona as well, I think they played a shaky schedule in the Pac and they haven't been tested. I am low on the Pac this year personally. I think, when your second best team is a 7 seed with Washington State, I don't have a lot of confidence. I think the Pac in its last year, Arizona might not have gotten tested enough. I think they have a very immature team, very inexperienced team. Obviously, they got some tournament action in the past, but still very young. In that region, I really like Baylor. Not the best team at times, but they played well in the Big 12, played a lot of competition. I think they're going to face off well versus these teams. That region, anything could happen, though. I'm going to go Baylor.
I'm interested on your takes on both the West and the Midwest, those 2 bottom regions. The West, the one that you got Baylor coming out, I got Arizona.
Yep.
That's the one that is by far the hardest region for me to convince myself that one of those teams is going to make it. Because if you just compare the West and the East, they are not even close to each other in terms of quality.
Not at all.
If Iowa State was the 2 or even the 3 seed in that West division, I have them walking to the Final Four.
I completely agree. And it almost makes me wonder when the selection committee is doing this, what are they seeing? Obviously, it's a very private. It's unlike the college football playoff where we get tons and tons and tons of information. They have to rationalize their choices. I'm wondering, are they just looking for ratings? Are they trying to get a nice game in the Elite 8? It doesn't make sense to me at all. No, I think for me it's seeing what UNC is doing and unable to commit to any sort of one style of play in the offensive board. They also play very slow at times. Cormac Ryan should not be playing in the style he is. He is not a traditional shooting guard who can take all sorts of shots. He's a 3-point specialist who can play very poor defense and stay in games and be an emotional support leader kind of guy. How they have him going now and taking any sort of external shot, and they pack the paint with Baycott, they pack the paint with Davis and try to get him to be that guy that gets open with his own. I don't think that's how you're going to be able to win. I think if you have a spy in the zone, if you have a guy staying back looking in transition, you're going to be able to honestly play a 1+4 zone where you have a 1 guy on him at all times and maybe play a 2-2.
Little box and 1.
Exactly, yeah. I think UNC is very stoppable. They shoot well. They are very athletic. They're a gifted roster, but I'm not convinced that they have the talent there. And I'm saying this with having watched many UNC games this year.
Me as well.
Exactly.
That's why I got him going out to St. Mary's in the Sweet 16. You think Michigan State or Mississippi State has any chance of knocking them off in the second round? And who do you like in that matchup?
I like Michigan State. I do. I think they play Wisconsin well.
Is that just because it's March and it's Tom Izzo?
It is, but Michigan State's a great rebounding team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They're not a tall team. You wouldn't see that on the box score, what they can do. But they're able to get second looks. They tip a lot. They have a lot of size, even if they don't have a lot of height. I like them being able to stay in games with rebound. I mean, Mississippi State, Michigan State, that's not necessarily the fanciest basketball, but they're going to be playing physical. I like them there, but I think, like we saw in Wisconsin.
Yeah, just going to get a little outdone.
Exactly.
I think that if there was a region this year where one of those double-digit seeds made a run to the Final Four, ooh, I really think it would be the West, and I'm looking specifically at a New Mexico team.
Yep.
And I know you got them going out in the round of 32 to Baylor, but I got them moving on to the Sweet 16. Baylor's been really shaky, and for a lot of the year I was higher than most on Baylor, but they're just a little shaky, and you really don't know what you're going to get because two of your big guys, your big playmakers, and Misi and Jacoby Walter are freshmen, inexperienced. You got a guy like Ray J. Dennis, but it's his first year with the program. He's fun to watch. They're a really fun team to watch. So I hope they don't go out early because I do enjoy watching them play. They play a fun brand of basketball. Fast-paced, a lot of shooting, a lot of ISO ball.
It's so fun.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun. But this is a hot New Mexico team. They got a great backcourt. Jalen House is playing unreal right now. I think that if they kind of get hot from deep, which they kind of did in that Mountain West tournament, you could really see them go on a run here. And I think that their path with Baylor at the 3, Clemson at the 6. Clemson is not playing good basketball right now.
They're not.
I think New Mexico's favored in that game.
Yep.
I think that they take that one. I think that the Baylor matchup's interesting. I think that'll be a really fun game. It'll be run and gun all over the place. A lot of threes. Going to be fun to watch. If they can get past that, I think Arizona's a coin flip.
Yep.
Depending on how New Mexico shoots. And then whether they're playing North Carolina, St. Mary's, Alabama, whoever. None of those games are impossible. If they're playing a UConn, I don't like their odds. But since they're in by far the weakest region, I'm not picking it.
Yep.
But that's probably the double-digit seed that I think has the best chance of going to the Final Four.
Mexico, I would agree with you there. I think of the 10s and above, yeah. Too many of their games, and I think a lot of their games moving forward, are going to be dictated by fouls. We're going to play faster. We're going to be able to play fast without playing stupid. Are we going to be giving up double bonuses when they should be a single? They're going to foul. They're going to be physical. They're going to, guard you in transition on the defensive side of the ball, and they're going to go as fast as possible on the other side. They're going to be going for steals. They're going to be going for blocks. It's how Patino plays. It's how when he tried to do it in Minnesota, but in the Big Ten, he didn't have the guys to do it. I think he can build a really, really strong crew here at New Mexico. I think he's on his way to doing that. Next year, he has a lot of guys coming in. I think he'll be staying there. I don't think at this time he's ready to go back to the Power 5. But are they going to be able to withstand making stupid fouls, those reaches, those things that get you another shot at the line, that keep another team in the game when you're playing really well? You gotta not make turnovers, and fouls can be turnovers for sure. So at the end of the day, Iowa State, UConn, we'll have to see. We wish Notre Dame was in there. I guess we'll be happy if an ACC team does some damage. Good for the conference.
Those are our rivals. I don't know if I'm really going for them too much. My only horse in this race is the Badgers, and all I got to say is go Bucky.
Go Bucky. Well, that's all for us. I'll say go Irish, but that's good enough for us. Stay tuned to The Observer. We got tons and tons of spring sports coverage on all the sports, baseball, softball, both of our very good lacrosse teams, and, of course, women's basketball. JJ Post and myself will be on the beat all weekend long and next weekend if we make it there as well. Trey, very nice to have you on. We'll definitely have to make that again.
Had a great time.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all our listeners. I wish you the best in this March Madness season. From all of us here at North Fan or wherever you might be listening, have a great day and go Irish.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. To stay up to date with ShamTalk and get all our behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Notre Dame Television. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and go Irish!